Selamat petang, selamat sejahtera. Thank you very much for the opportunity to give a lecture to you. I am sorry I can't be there in person because during my time in Perang Gajah, I used to deal a lot with EPU, Ministry of Finance, and everybody in the government service. But since I left to join the World Bank, I have not had that much chance to mix with all of you. So I'm sorry that this lecture has to be done by Zoom. But I want to thank the University of Malaya and the Faculty of Economics and Public Administration to give me this chance to meet you all again. Now, it's supposed to be 3 hours, so the lecture is divided into 5 parts. Now, I am not going to give you a standard economics lecture. What I'm lecturing to you today is basically what is called complexity economics. Because the world is so complex these days that economics has moved into taking ideas from physics, from cybernetics, systems thinking, into a very complex view of how things are developing. So you will not find most of this in any standard textbook. And I'm giving you 81 PowerPoints, which is a lot. But if you actually go into every slide, it's taken information from the internet and from YouTube. So you can get anything you want from there and you decide for yourself. Life is, and economics is the same. It's all about telling stories. So let me start. The key themes is that ini Perang Gajah. Okay, the standard, African joke and even the joke in ASEAN is, when the elephants fight, the grass get trampled. My theme is that Malaysia should be sang kancil. We are not big, so we cannot fight the elephants head on. But it's extremely important that we must be smart about it all. So sang kancil is very smart, okay, and very nimble. And if we are not nimble and we don't have the speed and the cleverness, we will get caught in between the Perang Gajah. All right. Now we're in a very special time. This is the worst pandemic ever, worst since 1930s. Okay. And unemployment is rising. It's basically a K-shaped recovery. K meaning the K is the rich getting richer and the poor will be hit very, very badly. The rich can go online. The rich can in fact, doing quite well. The poor will have to go out for all the dirty jobs, essential jobs, expose themselves and suffer all the illness, the disease, and also loss of jobs. Now, the stimulus, monetary and fiscal stimulus is of the rich countries is minimum 3 times that for the last financial crisis, okay? And the trade war and the tech war and the national security risk cannot be calculated. There are no way the business models can calculate how much that risk is. I will explain later. But it is very clear. Technology will be the key winner to get out of this crisis. But everybody must think very clearly. How are we going to use technology to improve ourselves? So here's the good news. ASEAN +3, East Asia will be the first hit, was the first hit, first to control, first to reopen. And let's be blunt, the rich countries are struggling, okay? And the rest of the world are struggling. And my view is that the money will come back to ASEAN +3, okay? The stock market is you are still seeing some withdrawal because everybody's very nervous on the stock market, but we can talk about that a little bit later. So the big question, strategic question for Malaysia is, can Malaysia involve a new social compact to work together to create a new innovative, adaptive model and avoid being collateral damage in the Perang Gajah? Okay, so that's the heart of the issue. So part 1, this is about megatrends. I'm going to go through this very fast because I'm giving you too much information. This is the culmination I went through the net. I've been studying this for the last 4 or 5 years, but the last 9 months under COVID, under MCO, I've extracted all this information to put this together for you. So we are facing 6 transformative mega trends. You know all these mega trends. First of all, there's global rebalancing. Power is shifting from the West towards the East. It's not there yet, but it's moving. We are moving from a unipolar to a multipolar Cold War II. And after 2016, Brexit, Trump, right-wing populism, migration, everything karang kabut, okay? Now, the demographic story is very clear. The rich are growing older, but the young are facing jobless future, and again, if the Mexicans, the Latin Americans, they are poor, they move north to North America. If the Africans and the Middle East moved north to Europe, you need migration or war. This is definitely a serious problem. Then financialization. We have created more money than the world has ever imagined. Who can imagine that the central banks of this world created $7 trillion? Okay, $7 trillion. World GDP, 87 trillion. In just like that, okay, within 3-4 months, they did it. And we have the biggest debt ever. So who's going to pay for this, right? Then the technology is very good, but every technology creates job loss, right? So with the COVID, it's going to be big government, big technology, all the technology company doing well, stock market, everybody else stock price drop and cut jobs. The government has been trying to keep the people in the jobs, but in the United States, the job pay is going to end at the end of this year, and next year, no job, no insurance, mati, okay? And then climate change. We are suffering from water, food, and energy stress. Governance, is it going to be liberal indecision, the democracy cannot do any decision, or is it going to be very right-wing, from fascist to autocratic to communist or whatever? Is it hegemony? So any one of these 6 problems is bad enough, but all are interacting at the same time. They are entangled, okay? And so our business models, our policy models, and we're facing black swans every day, gray rhinos, you can imagine it. The minute Trump says, America first, no more level playing field. Everyone for themselves. My view, Malaysia first. Nobody else matters, okay? So how do we think about that is very critical. So what we are facing now is increasing and more rapid crises. In the last 40 years, we've seen at least 4 or 5 crises. Very bad crises. First of all, there was a Latin American debt crisis. Then there was a European monetary mechanism crisis, right? Then 97 Asian financial crisis, because basically we followed the dollar, the Fed refused to give us dollars, then we all went into crisis. Then 2007, instead, after the European crisis, basically a yen crisis, then it became the euro and the dollar crisis. And then 2017, I expected another financial crisis. What happened instead? We had a political crisis, Brexit, populism, and then Trump. And then now, 2020, it's a pandemic. But the pandemic is not just a simple crisis. It is a crisis of medical health. It is an economic crisis. It is a job crisis. It's a financial crisis. It's a political crisis. It is a technology crisis. And most of all, it's a moral crisis. Right? So Paul Krugman, the Nobel laureate, said, the economics profession went astray because economists as a group mistook beauty clad in impressive-looking mathematics for truth. There is no absolute truth. It depends on where you sit. We are exactly like the blind man feeding the elephant. The guy who holds a tail, he said the elephant is straight. The one who put the side, the elephant is curved. The leg, they think that's a trunk. The elephant is 360 degrees, but it's much, much more big and much more complicated. So climate change. Look at the red areas. Every single country with red area will have water crisis. Okay? And the northern parts don't have, okay? And Malaysia is not there, but India's definitely going to have a crisis, right? All this area will have a crisis, and where will the population go? Up to Europe. Where will the Latin Americans, Latin Americans, the worst hit, where will they go when there are no jobs? They will go to America. In 2050, 1/3 of Americans will be Latinos. They will not be speaking just English, they'll be speaking Spanish, right? Now, out of the world population, sorry, I beg your pardon. By 2050, the world population will be 9.7 billion. Most of the increase will come from Africa, and Asia, right? So where are we going to find the jobs for all this? And then the climate change, we are SS planet Titanic. The climate warming is just like GDP. We're no longer talking about averages. We are talking about range. We are having higher temperature and colder winters. We're having too much rain and too little rain. Okay? So the volatility has increased in everything you can think of. Averages don't tell you the truth. Okay? You have to deal with the range. And the volatility, the range, the risks are now very extreme. Okay? So, free market economic paradigm, if you allow the free market, big market, small government, everything will be good. Everything will revert back to normal. Sorry lah, everything was wrong, right? We are seeing growing social and wealth inequality. This is, you all know about. Climate change was not even in Keynes. You read Keynes, you read Adam Smith, the other climate change, okay? They did not see the climate change nor the global connection. They talk about techno-optimism. Technology is good, but 80% of the jobs can be destroyed by robotization, right? Global aspirations, but failed local expectations. Everybody thought, oh, globalization must be very good. Trade is win-win, but who gets no jobs, right? And the rich middle class in America and Europe, lost jobs. And concentration. Joseph Stiglitz has said, it's 1% of the 1% for the 1%. And the young feel that the system is rigged against them. We are now in a crisis of identity. Everybody got their own biases. Everybody in their own little social welfare bubble. What you see in your phone, the minute you like a book, the Amazon will tell you what book you like. And they will not send you books that you don't like. So after a while, you only see things you like and you do not see things that you do not like, so you don't get a balanced picture. So if you're of the left, you get all the left views. If you're on the right, you get all the right views, and they are the enemy. So we get polarization tremendously. But all this is false binary. We versus them, but it's not we, it's us. As the saying goes, I am in you, you are in me. If we look at the DNA of all the population in the world, everybody campur, okay? Everybody campur, right? There's no such thing as a pure white or a pure black or, pure brown, right? Everybody campur. So it's a false binary, right? And then we measure GDP, we never measure pollution, right? We never measure the entanglement. All these are ignored. So the paradigm is failed, right? We need a new paradigm that takes into consideration radical uncertainty, people, planet, and morality, right? So Noble Current Movement, gives you this very simple chart. We missed globalization. Well, what happened? Basically, globalization since 92, there was jobs, right? Manufacturing jobs. Then after 2000, by the way, that's when China joined the WTO, the manufacturing job fell off a cliff. The rich country, you pay gaji very high, they move all the jobs first to East Asia, then to China, then to India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, semua, right? And then the deficits keep on growing. So technology has disrupted jobs, insecurity drove populism, right? And then, it is the elephant curve. If you then look at what happened was the bottom 90% in Europe and West Europe lost income because they lost jobs. They became gig economy. Gig economy, no social security, no medical health. That's why Medicare in America is so political, right? The top 1% captured 27% of total growth. The bottom 50% only captured 12% of growth. Mana fair? It's not fair, right? So this is like an elephant, it's like an elephant, right? And this is all about global inequality and growth, which push politics, and this is very bad. So this chart you can see in the Google anytime, right? World GDP, 88 trillion, right? China, 16%, US, 24%. But on PPP terms, China, because, purchasing power parity, $1 spent in China is not the same as $1 spent in the United States, because labor in China is cheap. On PPP basis, China has already exceeded America. So the reality is the world's largest consumer is the United States, while China is basically the world's factory, okay? And basically America imports mostly that manufactured goods. But it is not made in China, okay? If you take an iPhone, do you know how many percentage of value added is an iPhone for China? 4%. In fact, China does not make any of the chips in this, but one of the small chips and some of the software comes from Malaysia. Okay, so it's all entangled, right? And so that's why the Chinese are going for made by China, not made or assembled in China, right? Now, so the U.S. leadership role. There's no question. At the end of the Second World War, the United States was nearly half of world GDP and wealth, right? The rest of the world was more or less destroyed, particularly Europe, Asia, Samoa, right? American dollar was number one. But today, if you look at the US Congress report, and this is from 1st October 2020, that's wonderful part about the internet. America had 4 traditional roles. Number 1, global leader. Number 2, defense and promotion of liberal international order. Number 3, defense and promotion of freedom, democracy, and human rights. And number 4, prevention of emergence of regional hegemons in Euro-Asia. Previously it was thought to be Russia, now it's thought to be China, right? But under Trump, all these roles are being challenged, right? Are they defending liberal international order? They have retreated out of WHO, maybe talking about retreating from TPP, Samoa, right? And all these issues are big problems. And then defense and promotion of freedom, democracy, and human rights. Well, they invaded Iraq and Afghanistan and got Jampo in Syria, and now what a big mess, right? And then, the prevention of emergence in regional hegemons in Euro-Asia, complicated. But fundamentally, what is happening in America and also in Europe is actually job insecurity. If you look at it, automation will affect 80% of the workers through wage suppression and job loss. And this is very real. This is what Malaysia needs to take care of. Our biggest challenge is, what are we going to do with our youth, okay? Now, the global growth, as I said earlier, is driven by demographics and higher savings. So where are the biggest savings in the world? ASEAN +3 plus India. All this is now moving into middle income. This is a very good story, right? Global entry of China and India more than triple the size of the world's labor force. There's a very good book by my good friend, Professor Charles Goodhart at LSE, which basically says all the economics fail to take consideration the entry of China and India and all this into the global workforce. Therefore, no global inflation. Everything oversupply, no inflation, and then the rich countries bungle their policies, okay? So what will happen is that the trade war will shift the business towards more regional trading. Sorry, I beg your pardon, right? So Europe is the biggest trade within Europe. NAFTA is 40 trillion and Asia Pacific is 52 trillion, okay? So, now you look at this map and you look at COVID. Who is the worst hit? Basically, UBRIC, United States, Brazil, Russia, India, Colombia, right? So, and nobody's going to support Venezuela in trouble, Argentina in trouble, Brazil in trouble, Africa, having serious problems, right? The only growth area at this point of time is East Asia. We control the COVID better than anybody else. Just think about it. Malaysia, only about 13,131 deaths. In America, more than 7.9 million and 210,000 deaths. By end of the year, estimated 400,000 deaths in America alone, in the United States alone. And this is supposed to be the best prepared scientifically and competence, etc. I am totally proud of Malaysia. You guys have done a fantastic job, okay? Now, EU is most dependent on export trade. Chinese share is already gone down from 36% to 22%. America has always been flat, less than 10%. Okay, sorry, less than 15%. Okay, so, but the tariffs hurts everybody. All right, remember this, the free trade is good for everybody. Free trade is win-win. But when you win-win, you have winners inside your country, and how you divide the win-win inside your country is domestic policy. Okay, right? And now Trump is basically saying, let's, this is a China virus, this is a cut the thing, decoupling, but everybody loses. So if you really look at what's happening, the impact of the trade policy, I won't go into detail, but advanced Asia may suffer, but not that bad. Emerging markets will suffer a lot, okay? And the Fed policy has just shown that America is now paying big time. The consumers are going to pay in terms of lost jobs, industry is going to pay, it's going to be a big problem. But China is also paying. So they are preparing for long haul decoupling, okay? And all the trade truce does is to buy time. It's just like perang, when you have war between each other, you must have a ceasefire. What do you do in a ceasefire? You basically go and bury your dead, heal your wounded, and you buy time, and you then start fighting again. So basically, China is using domestic competition between regions to do this. We can talk about this when you ask the question. So before the COVID, KPMG had already studied the trade war. They estimated world GDP will cut by 3.5. Well, world GDP this year will be cut by minimum 6%, okay, for 2020. And it may be lower for longer than we realize. So let me very quickly summarize. What's the problem? We have climate change, consumption, debt, politics, and morality. They're all one problem. When you talk about quantitative economics, basically they ignore politics. And then they say, oh, climate change is an externality or market failure. So if you have a carbon tax, you solve this. This is rubbish. That's Wall Street talking. You transact carbon tax, you will never agree on carbon tax, so everybody happy. Who is the biggest blockers of carbon tax? Guess what? Oil companies, fossil fuel companies. 50 of the world's largest oil companies, coal companies, account for 80% of the carbon emission since fossil fuel was started. Okay, go and look into Google, you'll see all these numbers. But what is excessive carbon emission all about? You cannot have carbon emission if you don't consume. And you cannot consume if people don't lend you money. Okay? So America is the world's largest consumer with the largest debt. So they have no hard budget constraint. So therefore, a lot of the carbon emission is due to America consuming, right? And not just America now, China is consuming, India is going to consume, ASEAN is going to consume, Africa is going to consume, they're going to borrow more money, and then we'll burn all of us out. So the neoliberal politics was to cut tax, increase welfare, equals excess deficit, financed by excessive debt. This is the issue that EPU is struggling with, Bank Negara is struggling with. What is the limits of our debt? This is a big question. But QED, you can't solve the climate change or inequality because you are funding debt at negative real interest rates. Now, I'm going to make a very controversial point. With zero interest rates, we are already at Islamic finance situation. Okay? But as long as negative real interest rates means if you save, The borrower is actually taxing the depositor. So what has happened? Look at what's happened to the Malaysian stock market. Every depositor who cannot get money from the deposit, speculating on rubber glove stocks, tech stocks, and the turnover of Bursa is increasing. And this is not just true in Malaysia, it's true around the world. Okay? So basically, the moral issue is free market economics don't care about people or planet. Now, let's now spend a little bit of time talking about what the EU, US, and China plan for 2030 and 2033. You go to the website, you can get all this information. The US, the deep state does the best work. They splinter the world in 2035 into 3 worlds. National islands, that means everybody protect themselves. America become protectionist, China, worried about it, become more protectionist, Europe become more protectionist, and they will also become regional orbits. Everybody surround themselves with allies, TPP, RCEP, etc. But at the same time, the world is divided into transnational communities. The best transnational community is that there are many NGOs that align with each other. But also, they align through, for example, ISIS is a transnational community. Okay, you may not like them, or you have disagreements about them, but they have global reach. Okay, so that makes global governance and national governance very hard. And so the US is seeing rising conflict. Okay, the EU study the same global trends that I described before, and they said there are 4 scenarios. There's going to be a Cold War, the EU will be stable in a stable world. Or it could be hollow foundations, unstable EU itself breaking up in an unstable world, the worst situation. Or, then you have hollow foundations means, stable EU in unstable world, and then sick men, which is unstable EU and unstable world, and global power, stable EU and unstable world. What is China doing? They have a Made by China 2025, the Belt and Road, as you know, they announced by 2020 CO2 peak, and then carbon neutrality before 2060. So different countries are using different powers, are using different strategies in this, all right? So to sum up this part, I can use 6P to attain global sustainable development goals, right? And we see global rivalry on all 6Ps. Competition between people, competition over planet, competition over profits, competition over power, competition on paradigm, and most of all, competition in process. The old free market economy was one size fit all. You fit best standard. Sekarang tak ada best standard, only best fit. What best fit your own standard? And so it's about a search, it's about experimentation, it's a competition between different models. So now let me talk about strategy. Now, why is this part particularly important? Because I discovered that if you think about the problem wrongly, you will make the wrong decisions. Okay, now we think about it because of different information, different backgrounds, different values, different morals, different political bias, etc. But it is about assess, evaluate, experiment, review, and execution. I always say, vision without execution is delusion, right? Now, strategic thinking has become far more complex now. If you were in EPU before, it was relatively straightforward. Today, it is much, much more complicated, because not just because of politics, but because of global interconnection, etc. So the West, under America, used to think that there is always a first best problem, the first best solution to every problem. Because America is a rich country, it is scientific, they always think well. So Kissinger, when he was talking to the Chinese said, no, every solution creates its own set of new problems. And that's quantum in many ways, because everything is now possible with many options. So today, who can imagine that the President of the United States can catch COVID? That the United States, the best prepared, and the United Kingdom, the best prepared, has got the worst outcomes in terms of infection management of the COVID and also the death rates. So the Western model is very linear, very deductive, very mechanical. And the new complexity economics, quantum theory, and cybernetics is about open, giant, complex systems. When Keynes started on his ideas and Hayek started on free market economics, another Austrian by name of Polanyi, who wrote the book, a very powerful book called The Great Transformation, he was anti-communism. But he said, look, the market is a part of the economy. The economy is part of society. Society is part of the planet. The planet is part of the universe. How can a market explain so many complex things? It's logical impossible. And that is absolutely right. Free market economy is incomplete, okay? The logical failures. So we did not see black swans. We did not see gray rhinos, the known risk coming at you. And we go into Thucydides' traps, what is known as black elephants fighting in the room, right? As you know, the elephant in the room means that there's a big issue nobody wants to talk about. So nobody wants to deal with this issue. So a lot of the problems within Malaysia are elephants in the room. We don't want to talk about it because we don't want to hurt each other, okay? But these problems, if you don't solve, they will hurt us completely. So I want to go into SWOT and PEST analysis. I will talk about this later. But it's very clear the old paradigm doesn't work anymore. We have a huge generational fight. The young do not have experience. They don't understand the consequences. They live for now. And if I die, you die. You know, we die. So we have a 6-year problem. And this Western philosopher called Buckminster Fuller, who invented the geodesic dome, said we are in a critical path. We are caught between mutually assured destruction of nuclear war or a burning planet. How do we navigate is really the key. And how do we navigate is true for every country, okay? But we cannot get decisions because everything is polarized. We are in a collective action trap, right? And ultimately, that's a clash of paradigms and market values. So what's SWOT? SWOT, most people know. In case you don't know, it's about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Notice this, SWOT analysis is not best of anything. It's actually a trade-off between strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats, okay? So if you use the Sun Tzu art of war, know yourself, know your enemies, win 1,000 battles. But whether between you win or lose, winning depends upon your competitors. Because if you are a competitor, if Lin Dan versus Chong Wei, okay? As you know, when Chong Wei is one of the best guys in badminton, when he faced Lin Dan, they're good. Mentally, he lost. That's why the first few times he lost. After he was laid off, he became mentally stronger. Then he could defeat Lin Dan. So, winning depends upon your competitor. Whether you lose depends whether you know how to defend yourself. But it's very clear in my mind, there is no such thing as pro-China, pro-United States, pro-Siapa. No permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. Malaysia first, okay? Let's consider Malaysia first. So now, what is PEST? PEST stands for you need to understand the context. A lot of strategy is done without understanding the context. You know, the free market economy, everything starts with a blank sheet of paper. The World Bank, IMF, before, and the Washington Consensus, they just took one model, they go from country to country, they change the country name, and they say, you know, liberalize your government, free market, lower your corruption, improve your trade, free trade, you know, reduce your fiscal deficit. You know, when you have a problem, you know, you increase interest rates, devalue, everything will go back to normal. Rubbish. Every country's political, economy, social, and technology is very different. So when you do this 2x2 analysis, the simple way is to look between market and state, okay? So you have big state, small market, you have total free market, you have big market, small state, and you have Soviet planning. life is not so simple. Actually, it's a trade-off between all these issues. So today's analysis is all about building scenarios. What will happen? This is what I'm trying to build for you. What will happen? And then what's the story? After you tell a good story, just like NEP is a very good story, okay? We have national unity. We go to do this. And NEP, in my opinion, succeeded. It succeeded in creating a Bumiputra professional class. But where did NEP not succeed? It did not succeed to create a Bumiputra entrepreneurial class. So you still have income wealth disparities between urban and rural, and between those who are tech and who are no tech, right? So if you get your narratives right, you will end up with shift in thinking, and you will change your whole business model, etc. So it's very clear the conventional risk management completely ignored black swans. For example, every bank invested huge amount of money on value at risk models. And do you know, in the last 10, 20 years, when they invested so much with Basel III, the minute the crisis occurred, Basel III out of the window, no bank need to obey on Basel III. Which banks were fined the most? Not because of their failure to comply with Basel III, but because of sanctions on not complying with FATCA. So for example, the most famous is BNP Paribas, the French bank. They loan money to somebody in Sudan and Iran. They were fined $8.9 billion US, okay? HSBC, supposed to be the world's local bank, the global local bank, 1/3 America, 1/3 Europe, 1/3 Asia. They lost all their money in America. They're still losing in Europe because of Brexit and all, and now Hong Kong problems, etc. You know, and then because of the data search and on all of them, they also got involved in Huawei sanctions. So that's why share price went up from 140 Hong Kong dollars peak to $27. Okay, that's the situation. So let me now go very quickly to a little bit of a history lesson. Right? If you go to Ray Dalio, you just type Google it, Changing World Order. He's giving you a free book. And you look at what has happened, right? He goes from 1500, when China and India were 50% of world GDP. The red is in the China, right? And then India is this blue line, right? This is India, okay? The two of them were 50% of world GDP up to about 1600. Then you notice the Netherlands came up, the Dutch came up, the Portuguese came up, right? Okay, so the Spanish came up, right? And then that's Malacca, right? And then Manila, right? And then the Europeans discovered maritime warfare. The British started coming up, okay? The United States can come up, right? By 1750, China already starting on the down, India already on the down. Look at India, completely exploited by Britain. British history was, India's history was, between colonization and independence, the British share of world GDP went down from 34% of world GDP to 4% of world GDP by 1947, okay? The Indians estimate that the British stole something like $50 trillion from India in today's money, all right? It's a huge amount, daylight robbery. Anyway, you know how much they took from Malaysia also, all right? So you notice, America in 1750 was nothing, and by Second World War, world number one. And thereafter, America started falling. China in 1950 was nothing, okay? India was nothing. And then over this period, India begins to climb back, and China, rapid growth. So what are the factors? Well, the factors, you know, Ray Dalio said very well. It was about war, it was about education, it's about innovation, it's about competitiveness, it's about military, it's about trade, it's about output, finance, and reserve status. And everything was up from 1700 all the way up to 1750, when the US dollar overtook the pound sterling, and then it went flat, and then recently they started declining. Okay, so the Americans were running larger deficits in trade, fiscal, financed by larger debt. So then if you look at every single area, right, in trade, the red line is China, the blue line is America, narrow. Output, narrow. Financial center, the Chinese way behind, but coming up very fast, right? In education, catching up. In innovation, catching up. In military, American way ahead. America spends 3 times more than anybody else per capita GDP on military, and the amount of firepower is all the 5 big powers, next big powers put together. America's number 1, no question about it, right? Competitiveness, this is disputable, but America's down, China's up. This is a Ray Dalio. This is the world's largest fund manager. And the reserve status, the US is way ahead, right? But the US is suffering from political, social, and wealth polarization created by debt and financialization. So you look at American income, narrowing, American wealth share, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, right? This is about the bottom 50 declining and the rich getting richer, the ideological positioning widening, right? And the unemployment rate is shooting up, the central bank balance sheet is shooting up, right? The external debt is shooting up, etc. But let's remember this. If there is a nuclear war, and this is Perang Gajah dengan nuclear powers, and these are all the world's nuclear powers, there was a recent study that if India and Pakistan go to very low level nuclear war, the world's 16% of the world's food will be destroyed because of the radioactivity and the dust cloud around the world. And that's only between 2 minor nuclear powers, right? So the Americans even ran, so you can go through this, study that America is going to be very complicated. And that's why the US-China Thucydides trap, there is no historical analogy and dangers of miscalculation. And that's what is very dangerous, because everybody's got a button on the nuclear button, and if you fight, we're going to be a problem. But look at this table. At the moment, how many Chinese are studying in America? 350,000. How many Americans studying in China? Less than 10,000. Okay? So more Chinese understand America, speak English, than Americans understand about China. But look at the STEM data. Look at the Chinese increase in the STEM and the spending. Education in people is everything. You know, China and India produces half of the world's STEM graduates. If we don't get our STEM graduates up, we cannot compete. We cannot compete, we will be trampled, right? So it's not just about America worrying, we worry about all the big competitors, okay? And by 2022, Chinese R&D funding will exceed the United States, right? Look at the COVID controls, right? The COVID, you don't control the COVID controls you, right? Dr. Fauci said this, right? And who is not the BRIC economies is UBRIC. US, Brazil, Russia, India, Colombia are the epicenters of the world thing. And when are we going to solve ourselves? Most likely Q3, Q4, 21, and maybe by late 2022. So what's the real situation in the COVID economy, right? The real situation is that there is more excess capacity than ever. Airlines, mati. Hotels, mati, right? Online, booming. No business as usual, okay? The structural shift, as you all in EPU, Ministry of Finance, Bank Negara, it must be supported by government. But only the business sector can make that innovation and change. And if our business sector don't make that innovation and change, we also rugi, right? But in reality, 90% of existing workers not prepared for the digital shift. So it's very clear To be able to compete, the government must be willing to experiment, delegate to local governments and civil society to foster change, and be prepared to absorb the interim losses and transit costs. Because one thing is very clear, those who reform fastest will win, those who are slow will be marginalized. Now, let me say this outright. I am very proud of Malaysian civil service during this COVID. Okay? You have done very well. But we must now think beyond the COVID. How to do this is a key question. So let me now, part 3, talk about the tech and finance, because that's where the future is. The reality is that there is concentration in the world. As I said just now, the rich will get richer, the poor will get poorer, and everything will be more concentrated. So if you look at the McKinsey data, in every single area, those who went by digital succeeded. Media, telecom, finance, retail, automotive, high-tech, professional services. Everything can go online. Everything can go online. Offline jobs, mati. Okay? So we really have serious problems. And in finance, everything is connected. But look at these numbers. Today, can you believe that the central bank in the world now larger than pension funds and insurance companies? Right? Take Bank Negara. How big is EPF? EPF is 1 trillion ringgit. Bank Negara is 100 US dollar reserves, roughly 400 billion. Okay? So in Malaysia, the pension funds are larger than central banks. But today, the Bank of Japan alone is 120% of GDP. The Bank of Japan owns half of government debt and 75% of Nikkei ETF. That means the Bank of Japan is already investing in stocks. Just like Hong Kong Monetary Authority, when I was there, we bought Hang Seng Index and rescued the Hong Kong dollar, right? So if central banks have large impact on financial markets, are they free financial markets? They're not. So the key question is, the stock market already peaked in 2019 with the lowest interest rates and the highest stock market. How big is the world market capitalization? 94 trillion, 108%. Global bond market, 108 trillion, 124%. Global banking system, 178%. Other financial institutions, these are much lower. This number is already outdated because of QE, right? And derivatives, only 12 trillion. So total financial assets, printed money of every kind, is 380 trillion or 440%, 450% of world GDP. So what is the stock market? The stock market boom is this index, the red line. This blue line is the assets of the Fed, ECB, and BOJ in dollars. Look at this. It exactly follows the central bank. Central bank print money, the stock market immediately recovers. Without central bank print money, the boom will not be there. So the US is extremely successful because the US accounts for 40% of global bond market, 40% of the world's equity market. And why are they so high? Because they have the best ROE. That means if you invest in dollar stocks, you make more money than investing in European stocks or Japanese stocks or Chinese stocks. So people put in US dollars, okay? Right? And until recently, investing in US treasuries earned 4%, and then investing in German bonds 1%, and now invest in German bonds minus 0.5%, investing in US treasury 1%. So the US still have an interest differential. Now the US and EU still accounts for the bulk of global financial assets, and Asia is still bank dominated. You can see this in Malaysia. The Americas and Europe are still strongest in pension and insurance asset, and the pension and insurance assets are long-term assets. They are the spare tire. So when the banking system is stressed, the pension and insurance assets buy the stocks, keep the market stable, keep the bank stable. The best example is Australia. Before the Asian crisis, Australian pension funds was very small. Everything was the big five banks. So the Australians redesigned the system to encourage individuals to invest in pension funds. So when the 2008 crisis happened, hello, sorry, is somebody talking? Okay, so when the crisis happened, the pension funds bought all the Australian share stocks at a very low price. When the crisis was over, the pension funds made a lot of money. Okay, so today the Australian pension funds are bigger than the Australian banks in terms of asset size, and this happens in Singapore with the GIC and the CPF, and in Malaysia with the EPF. The EPF is our stabilizer. And APAC capital markets, look at this, APAC capital markets, Asia Pacific, is already bigger than the European, okay? But we are the biggest IPO. So now, we are shifting out of a debt market into an equity market basis. Look at the stock market. This is McKinsey data. Over the October 2020 data, okay? You're getting the latest data from everywhere. Tech stocks making money, financial services drop, oil and gas drop, insurance drop, real estate drop, conglomerates a little bit, okay? So basically, tech is the big winner. And the government fiscal support 3 times more than 2008 GFC support, okay? Look at us, it's Italy, okay? Italy is big trouble. But Germany this time, it become big spender, all right? So this is big change in Europe. Overall, the financial system has become much more over-leveraged, right? And as I said earlier, look at the financial systems, right? The financial system was controlled after GFC, 2008. The household controlled somewhat, but the government deficits have grown very, very badly. Now, so what has happened after the 2008? Through the Basel III, etc., the financial sector leverage has been reduced, but the interest rate now cut to 0. So there is very little room for maneuvering. So both monetary space and fiscal space is now out, okay? And let's be very blunt. There is no theory behind QE. All the European, Japanese, and American central banks but let's look at CNY, kacang putih, really kacang putih, okay? Sterling and Japanese yen, kacang putih, okay? The real one is dollar, euro, and gold and euro, okay? So, but the Americans are going to grow, and this is before the COVID, okay? America already increased this fiscal debt by 3 trillion up to now, and they want to spend another 2 trillion, another $5 trillion, okay? $5 trillion, right? $5 trillion is 10 times Malaysia's GDP, okay? Right? So this is the US debt will become 152% of GDP. My study on the Asian financial crisis said, if any country net foreign assets were 50% of GDP, it will be crisis. The US already at 40% of GDP and heading towards 50, okay? Now, there is a very beautiful study by the OECD. This just came out today. In fact, I saw in the Financial Times, and I just downloaded the book, and these charts are very useful. They need to cut global tax. But if you look at the numbers, the corporate tax, actually, corporate taxes in OECD, in America, pay only 100 billion. How many did households pay? 2 trillion. Hey, this is not fair, man, right? So how can we, and look at them, they're paying less and less tax. So everything put their money offshore, Hong Kong, Singapore, Luxembourg, etc. This is not good for anybody. So let me now finish today's part 4, and then we'll stop. And then our last part, I'll talk about Malaysia, and then we'll have the break, and then we talk about Malaysia, and then we'll have questions and answers. Why am I still optimistic? I say that East Asia will still be the growth zone. Look at this, right? IMF World Economic Zone studies, actually all the growers, China, India, ASEAN, Korea, others, 70.9% of world growth in 2019, East Asia. So if we have a US-China, US-East Asia war, because the conflict will involve everybody, I don't care on whose side, East Asia will go to negative growth, the whole world will go into the 1930s world global depression. Because if you think about it, Africa in problem, Latin America in problem, rich countries in problem, only positive growth area, East Asia. Okay? So by these are not Andrew Sheng saying this, these are data from everywhere, all right? And this is a major study about APEC. By 2030, APEC, this is ASIFMA, Asian Securities Industries Financial Association, right? Financial Management Association. By 2030, APEC could reach half of world's capital market. But we cannot do it because our markets are very fragmented. ASEAN cannot get our act together. But despite this, McKinsey thinks that if China were to make the major reforms, China could account, now don't agree with all the management consultants, but at least the data are all here. I won't go into the details, right? McKinsey says that if China get their act together, they can get 22 to 23 trillion gains from better Chinese engagement with the rest of the world to 2050. All the data are here, okay? How they do it, standard McKinsey story. You go into the website, you can get that. You can check all the data. How did the Chinese do this? Now, one of the reasons why I study the Chinese is that you must know your rival. If you don't know how your rival operate, you cannot beat them. And you can beat them. Because the Japanese look at this, right? How do they do this? And a lot of Chinese growth model, speed times scale times scope. Spot on. They can go speed, they can go scale because 1.4 billion people, and because they've got very different scope. Let me give you a simple example. White goods. You know, the Chinese used to make washing machines. Westinghouse. Okay? Then what did the Chinese do with the washing? And people didn't understand why. How did this machine operate under very different conditions? And you know what the designer said? He said Chinese washing machines, the seller discovered that Chinese washing machines in the kampong, they use it to wash vegetables and potatoes. So the washing machine got clogged up with mud. So they changed the filter, and then the washing machine does not clog. Okay? So then the washing machine, very reliable, very cheap, very sellable, right? So, you know, the Chinese, you know, think about these issues from a very different way. They may not be very good individually, but they create the products that the market needs at a cheaper, faster, bigger scope. So Alibaba basically concentrate on customer, concentrate on people, concentrate on organization, concentrate on technology, and concentrate on investment. Let me give an illustration. How is it possible that the Chinese can build bridges, complex bridges, faster, better than anybody else? Answer, WeChat. You know what they do with the WeChat? You know, if you are a factory guy, you are a person on the foreman. If you use the old hierarchy system, if you find a problem, if you go to your foreman, the foreman go to the engineer go to the chief engineer go to the architect. Mati sudah. What does the worker do in using WeChat? Take a photograph of the problem, send it up the line into the WeChat group. Immediately, the boss makes a decision, do this. Okay? Nowadays, you notice with medicine, what happens? Your doctor sees a patient. He takes an iPad photograph of the patient, send it to the specialist. The specialist can send it to some of the best doctors in America. The American doctor take one picture. Here's my advice. This is this medicine, this blah, blah. So technology can change the game semua. Okay? But the tech cycle is waiting for a new product breakthrough. What is the product breakthrough? 5G. That's why the Chinese went to 5G and the Americans must stop 5G. Okay? Because the 5G is going to control your robot cars, your robot factory. Okay? Now, why do they say that, under WeChat, under this 5G, they are spying on you? Answer is, the Americans are already spying on you. Apples know exactly where I have been. Even if I go to the toilet, the GPS will tell you I've been to the toilet. Tell me what I like, what I don't like, what I buy. Okay? So actually, the problem is, if there is 5G and it is quantum computing, the Americans are worried that the Chinese under 5G, they cannot read the Chinese can read Americans. That's the reality. What is the solution? We must devise our own crypto thing. We don't care about the hardware. It's not the hardware. It is the software. So we should be able to develop our own software ourselves, right? And that is very critical. So now the technology and consumer stocks dominate global market cap and trading. Ang Tat already says this. But Asia, look at this. America has all the global platforms. Mana Europe. Asia has got it all. And it's not just Tencent, Alibaba, but Samsung, okay, Gojek, Rakuten, all these are coming, Grab, all these coming, right? And all this is happening in urbanized smart cities, super clusters. They drive innovation and growth, okay? Because what is Silicon Valley? Silicon Valley is 5 universities: Stanford, Caltech, University of San Francisco, Berkeley, and State University of University of Southern California, right? All these universities, their students are their workers, their professors are their research workers, and the professors are also the tech funders and the tech company growers. Have we got this in Malaysia yet? Look at Penang, look at the Penang cluster. Our tech companies have already started growing in Penang and in the Kulim and everywhere else, right? Look at Shenzhen, okay? This is where it's happening. The growth is urban clusters, right? How do you get knowledge people to work together to build very, very fast? That is the future. But the cities are also very vulnerable. By 2070, top 20 cities will be subject to closure funding. Where are they? Kolkata, Mumbai, Dhaka, Guangzhou, Saigon, Shanghai, Bangkok, Rangoon, Miami, Haiphong, Alexandria, Tianjin, okay? And including Tokyo and Jakarta, right? So cities with the most asset exploit, Florida, Miami, Guangzhou, New York, right? Because these are rich cities. If the water rises, Hong Kong, right, will be flooded. Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Ho Chi Minh, okay? All these means that we have to rethink. That's why Indonesia is moving Jakarta to Kalimantan. Okay, what is the problem now? What the problem now is, with all the QE printing money, we have high liquidity, low interest rate, we are all speculators, right? If the middle class is not getting interest rate on the deposits, we are all going into market turnover. So basically, we are all speculative. In my view, this is the perfect time to build the Islamic stock market, because the whole world is zero interest rate. So if the whole world is interest rate, too much debt, we can create the equity-based, equity, fairness, risk sharing rather than debt growth. Now, if you then think about what happens with the pension tech development potential, this is done by Capgemini and OECD, and KPMG analysis. This is not Andrew Sheng taking out of the whole air. The potential disruptors are going to be India and China, right? And all these are the main guys, and these are the laggards, all in the advanced countries. So if we adopt fintech and we have a developed pension system like what we have in EPF, we can be big winners. Okay, let me stop here. We will stop for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So we come back at 3:35, and then I'll finish this section, and then we can have Q&A. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, welcome back. Sri, we are ready for the second half.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right. We're now heading to the last part. So let me, say very clearly here, you are more Malaysian experts than I am. I concentrate on the broad issues, but these are some of my thoughts. Now, we all know that the world is moving to digital hang on. Can you all hear me, please? Just to be sure, okay? The world is moving towards digital and data-driven, that you all know. And ASEAN is the 6th largest economy in the world with 2.5 trillion GDP and 634 million population. This is a study done by Google. And the opportunities are actually quite huge. Now, if you then look at what is happening is that there are digital ecosystem emerging in Asia, right? So we got Gojek, Grab, Flipkart, all these are happening. And, since COVID, it's very clear the move to online has accelerated, okay, considerably. And so it's also very clear that even offline businesses can move to online much faster than people think, okay, including jobs. And so, maybe we should have platforms in Malaysia that would help different types of experts to advertise their services better, so that they can work online, get paid online, etc. Now, what did we miss? Actually, in my view, we had a window in 2018 when China was being, bashed by the trade tariff war, and they were moving businesses out. Now, this doesn't mean that we can't do it, but we have to rethink very carefully. And this is not just about Chinese businesses. This is really about European and American and all other businesses, right? Because a lot of them are beginning to move out. And so if you really look at the share of emerging market exports in labor-intensive manufacturing, China minus 3.1%, Vietnam gained a lot of it, Cambodia gained it, Bangladesh got it, India got a little bit, Indonesia a little bit, and others. So, these are, but one reason why they didn't come to Malaysia is because we are no longer a cheap labor place, okay? And the problem is, every time our Malaysian industries want cheap labor, we talk about importing them from Bangladesh, from Myanmar, Cambodia, Thailand, Indonesia, etc. But look at what has happened. If we keep on training foreign labor and our youth are unemployed, we will lose the competitive game. Let me say this. We should have confidence in ourselves, right? So far, we've got, yesterday data, 15,657 cases, 157 deaths, compared with 7.9 million in US, 219,000 deaths. Do you know how many deaths there will be in America by the end of the year? The estimate is 400,000. Okay? They've completely mismanaged the crisis. And it's not just mismanaged because of Trump. It's because the middle management, and including the state level and city level, very badly mismanaged. Whereas the Malaysian government has shown that it is pragmatic, it's adaptable, and it's resilient. Now, lots of wayang in politics, but that doesn't matter. Basically, we trusted the professionals. I think, the health has done very well. The police, the security services has maintained the MCO very, very well indeed. Okay? Our ringgit remains very cheap. Our actual export trade, if you look at what's happening with the electronic companies, all this remain very resilient. So East Asia is the first to suffer, first to control, first to reopen. So we will remain the global growth driver. Now, this doesn't mean that, if that by accident, anything could happen, but it is in everybody's interest at the moment to maintain East Asia, ASEAN +3, plus India, etc., as the stable zone. Because if we were to get into trouble, as I said, the whole world will get into worse trouble. Now, we need to understand that more and more, I, personally have been using more and more Malaysian manufactured products. My yogurt comes from a Johor company, that produces, in my opinion, better than any of the foreign-made yogurt. Okay, right? So Malaysian companies are adapting very fast to all these areas. Now, what is happening? The world will move towards green products and services. So let's be very frank. The Chinese are good, but they are not good in English speaking and Bahasa and everything else. So we have a niche in able to help, do that interface. The Americans are good, but we're not going to buy everything American after a while, because increasingly they will become more and more inward looking, right? The Europeans are good, but they are also getting more expensive, okay? So to a large extent, Malaysians being, the ringgit is cheap, okay? We have huge excess capacity. We are very nimble. We are very adaptable. But we must do much more to help our SMEs, all right? And I can share with you a lot of war stories of my own experience in this. So we need to move up to Industry 4.0. Now, stage 1 is arrival of foreign direct investment. We already had that. Stage 2, Vietnam is going towards agglomeration, right? Bangladesh is beginning to do that. We are now at the technology absorption phase. The nearest to us is actually Thailand, in my view. Okay? If you go to Thailand, you look at their products. They are making tom yum, paste, a design, Jim Thompson, a lot of their own brands. And we're still here. But the glass ceiling is our middle income trap. So unless we move to creativity, we can't get to top 4, because these are by the giants, right? But by the way, this is a ADB World Bank report, right? So we can produce the high quality goods. Let me put it this way, right? I was having a virtual coffee with a friend in Hong Kong. And I was drinking my kopi o, and she was saying, "Wait a minute, I'm going to get my coffee." What was it? It was an Ipoh white coffee. Okay. Now that gives you illustration that actually white coffee, we cannot compete with Jamaican coffee or Kenya coffee or Colombian coffee, Starbucks, right? But frankly speaking, our kopi o tastes really good. Our white coffee tastes very good. Okay. And I discovered a micro ground coffee called Essential. It's Malaysian made. That coffee tastes better, sorry to say this, than Nespresso. Okay, so I'm very proud in using Malaysian products. All right, and so I think we can move on, but we have not done that advertising, packaging, design, right? So all these are, how do you move to the next stage? So what is it? Actually, it's all about people, right? I just wrote an article last week for Star, how the post-COVID is about investing in people. If you look at the Americans succeeded because the return on capital is the highest, in the world, right? But that was because first they were the top manufacturers. Then they became the world's commercial banker. They lend in dollars. Then they went to become the world's investment banker. They borrow your money at 4% interest rate, and they send you FDI, and then they invest in your best companies. They put IBM, they put the Intel, Motorola, Starbucks, McDonald's, right? And they get a return 25% ROE. Okay? They use your money because Americans are borrowing your money. So they are the world's investment bankers. No European investment banker, no Japanese investment banker, no Chinese investment banker can beat the Americans. Similarly, even though the British and the Swiss are very good asset managers, guess what? Who is the best asset managers in the world? BlackRock, PIMCO, etc. They're basically American companies. So Americans have moved from commercial banker, first manufacturer, then commercial banker, then investment banker, then asset banker, and then now tech. Apple does not manufacture anything. Okay? They just design. And by design, they make most of the profits, for which they hide the profits in Ireland. Okay? Right? So, the whole system is about, brain power. Okay? And Malaysians are not short of brain power. And that's where we must adapt. We need learn to learn, and we move from fintech to edtech. Right. But investing in people, the investment in people, Malaysia spends the highest investment on people. 6% of GDP. I'm sorry to say this, this is not very polite. We have provided a lot of talent to Singapore and Hong Kong. I myself was working, in Hong Kong, okay? Right? If you go to Hong Kong, you will find that somewhere it's very hidden under the radar. 20% of all the accounting talent working in every foreign national company throughout China and Hong Kong are Malaysians. If you go to Singapore, some of the best doctors there are Malaysians, right? Now, the point is that we need to move away from balance sheet talent. That means, talent that works on the company for life, partnership talent towards freelance talent and borrowed talent. I want to tell you a story. I had a very good Japanese friend who was head of Esso Japan. He was 100% Japanese, Esso Japan, and then he became chairman Citibank, and then ran one of the best banks in Japan. And one of the Japanese guys, the very senior, Japanese guys, only old guys talk to each other. The Japanese guy said, Mr. So-and-so, we have many Japanese like that, like you. He said, that's your problem. You don't understand. Talent is not about the individual. Talent is about the person who knows how to pick the talent. Just think about it, right? In the 70s, our IGP was under the age of 35. Our head of the Navy was 31 years old. Sekarang semua 55 to 60 years old. Okay? Where is the young talent in Malaysia? Answer, we have become in promotion by seniority. Right? We must trust our young, because our young will have Rani, they will be the risk takers, right? So how do we do this? And so I was part of the Future of Finance team under CFA Institute, okay? And they looked at it, but only for finance, top 5 important skills: value, financial analysis, trust, IQ, compliance, EQ, cross-cultural skills, ST, social skills. You know, when I first got trained as a chartered accountant, came back to Malaysia, a very wise Sabahan, I come from Sabah, told me, you know, Andrew, you know what, but I know who. And he was absolutely right. And that is Malaysia's true strength, social technology, right? There was a guy called, a former McKinsey guy who's now at Oxford. His name is Eric Beinhocker. He wrote a very good book called The Origins of Wealth. And he said the origin of wealth comes from 3 things: physical technology, science, you know, engineering, right? Science, technology, social technology, and business models. The 3 of them combined is very critical. Now, physical technology nowadays you can buy, okay? Business model you can copy, because everybody got different business models. As I told you, the Alibaba Chinese business model is very different from the Americans. You know, very different from eBay, very different from Amazon, etc., etc. But Malaysians' strongest strength, in my view, is social technology. Why are Malaysians doing very well abroad? Why do Malaysians are some of the best diplomats? Because we live in a culturally diverse society. We go into a room. Why are Malaysians so good politicians? We go into a room. We immediately know how to talk to people. We are sensitive. We have EQ, okay? Because we understand different race, different culture, different background, different religion. We are sensitive. And we talk many different languages. And we understand trust and language skills, right? Look at what's happened today, right? Throughout the multinational companies, the recently, you know, Pepsi Cola, Indian, Google, Indian, Microsoft, Indian, very good articulation skills. The latest dean of the Harvard Business School is now an Indian. Why? Because they've got very good language skills. They speak many different languages, right? And Malaysia is very cultural. So we are perfectly situated in the Straits of Malacca with connection to the biggest Muslim market in the Middle East and Indonesia, all the way from Middle East to Indonesia, right? Right at the heart of it, right? We have access to the Chinese market, we have access to the Indian market, right? So, you know, that is a skill and a inheritance and a legacy, right, that we should exploit, right? But we don't need to compete with them. We just focus on the niche areas because we are the Sangkan chills, right? We cannot grow as big as the elephant as they are. And we are neutral, right? We don't have to be, we are friends with everybody, enemy to none, right? And therefore, we can do business with everybody. Now, if you really look through it, what is the most successful part is that we are the neutral protocol. You know, if you buy a Japanese DVD machine, okay, if it is a pirated disc, you can never read it. So what did the Chinese do? They put in a fuzzy-wuzzy chip into this Chinese DVD so they can read everything. Right now, that's of course IPR and all that sort of issues. But actually, every social different cultures need interfacing. And in my view, Malaysia is best at this, right? So we need to move from fintech to edtech to medtech, right? Middle technology, right? So you notice what has happened. Quite well. Our public universities have also done quite well, right? I mean, the right? Okay, so we have people that have done extremely well abroad, and we also, train a lot of people. Our medical tourism has done very, very well. Our food, halal, etc., is doing well, could be better. Look at our technology companies, right? Every tech stock is beginning to grow with PE ratio significantly larger than the banks, etc., right? Our rubber glove is number one. But hello, our rubber is now imported because, we became palm oil. But what happened to the palm oil? We imported Indonesian labor, we trained them, we import Indonesian labor in construction industry, we train them. 10, 20 years later, if you go back to Indonesia, you will find that the mandors, the managers are now Indonesians trained in Malaysia. Okay? And who is now the largest in palm oil? The Indonesians. Okay? And so to a large extent, we, who are leading in the technology, right, in palm oil technology, gave away these to our neighbors. And in the end, they become our competitors, and we're not careful. We must think very carefully about how to manage this, right? So our rubber gloves are doing well. But, if you really look at what has happened in Penang, right, in Kulim, right, when they were in 1968, Penang was the largest tech center in Asia, okay, other than Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan. Then, because we didn't have cheap labor, they moved it to Xiamen and China, and then gradually the Chinese market became too big for us to compete. And yet, we still have got good companies in design, in testing, in medical equipment. And do you know who is the biggest investor in Penang industrial estates? German companies, European companies, because they realize that Malaysia is still the most neutral place. There are many other countries where a lot of people are uncomfortable, okay? But they've discovered that we can get the engineers, etc. But if we completely have to rely on foreign workers, it cannot work. Let me give you an illustration. When I came back, I started talking to the tech companies in Bayan Lepas. I said, how much are you paying these Indonesian workers? Okay, 2,500 ringgit per month, including, fees for agents, etc. Hello, a lot of our workers are willing, the school leavers are lucky to get 2,000 ringgit per month. So I was trying a pilot scheme to get these companies to hire people from Sabah, Sarawak, because I come from that area, and get some of the Bumiputra there, who are school leavers, no jobs, come and work at the factories here. The trouble is that there's no organization to do this, okay? So every school is left to their own. So when the school leavers come out, they don't know where to look for jobs. And so they end up doing the dirty jobs, the low jobs, in which the foreign labor from Bangladesh, Myanmar are now fulfilling. If you cannot raise that wage, why should they do the dirty jobs, right? And so the result is we have not moved up market. So the result is our youth, go through a linear, education system in which, as you know, when I went to Silicon Valley, when I was on the Khazanah board, I was very lucky. I went to Silicon Valley, talked to the people there. Do you know that in Silicon Valley, 50% of the hirees don't finish their degrees? They don't care about the degree, where you come from. They want to know, which app have you worked on? Which design have you worked on? Which professor, who was your professor? How did you get this stuff? So they don't need to finish the degree. They get to the job with Google, with Intel, or whatever, and then 5 years later, they're out designing their own thing, and succeed. So we have a problem that we have an education system that is increasingly becoming obsolete, because a lot of the curricula is obsolete. Did you know that today, with the speed of knowledge growing, by the time a young person graduates, 50% of his knowledge is obsolete because it's so fast, stuff. So we have to rethink the whole education model, okay? And it can be done, but it depends upon our ability to adapt to the knowledge economy. So we now need to move out of, we succeeded, the NEP, in my opinion, has succeeded. We created the Bumiputra professional class, right? But we have not yet created the Bumiputra entrepreneurial class. But who can teach them? Not academics. Only existing entrepreneurs can teach them. And to throw them into the deep end to enable to live in that entrepreneurial system. And guess who are the best entrepreneurs today? People like myself who have retired. Okay, I'm not an entrepreneurial, I've been a professional, but I understand enough of the way they think about these issues, and I've taught enough. But it needs a new collaborative model and platform. So, some of you may have heard me say this before. Malaysia needs an ABC partnership. A is for academia, that's the university. This includes the private education platforms, right? They need to change the training from just purely producing graduates, but work with the employers, including government employers. What is the curricula that they need for the modern way to adapt and succeed? B is for business. We need the businesses to work very closely with the universities and with government to create the programs. Why do we have workers who have to 100% educate, 100% work? Why don't we have intern type programs for youngsters to work and study? In fact, the best successful German vocational training program, is actually the tutor. If you read from a book, you learn 15%. If you study the book yourself, you may learn 40%. If you have got a very good teacher and a very good mentor, you remember most of it. Because every day somebody cares about you, teach you how to deal with situation, how to react, okay? So mentoring and teaching is critical. Civil service. Civil service need to think about very different ways of doing it, because the civil service system basically has taken from the British, who copied it from the Chinese in 1842, right? They studied how did the Chinese work? Oh, meritocratic system, okay? Then they design it. And then they use that system to reform the British colonial service. And we are still using that British colonial model. And it's beginning to fail. It's beginning to fail even in Britain, okay? So we really need to work with the service. And we really need to think about how to equip our civil service with all the skills, including secondment to business, seconding to university, and mixing and working to this. How many excellent graduates there are in Bank Negara, in Khazanah, in Petronas, in TM, etc., all engineers, etc. What chance have they to get to work in the civil service and civil servants to work there? We should, mix these much more, okay? You can second them to private business, but you can also second them to GLCs, etc. You cannot achieve all this until we arrive at a new social compact. And that is where the dialogue is very important, okay? As I said, the problem today is not just in Malaysia. Everywhere we are in our own social bubble, okay? We all have nostalgia. When we grew up as students, we mixed everybody. We don't care color, race, religion, semua, okay? We mixed. Nowadays, everybody is likely to live in their own community, talk to their own people, in their own WhatsApp, or their own networks. And we rely on the elections, and that's fine. That's politics, right? But how much are we absorbing the bottom up? Okay, look at what's happening in Malaysia now. Where things are changing, it's changing at the local level, okay? Kuching as a city, Kota Kinabalu as a city, right? All the cities are beginning to change with better dialogues, etc. So we need to have good federal and local interface, in which, there's much better feedback from the grassroots up above, rather than sitting there saying, I know best. Nobody knows best anymore, okay? None of us is smarter than all of us, right? So we should use the technology, social media platforms, to drive, sensitivity, to understand what's happening at the grassroots level. 5 years ago, when I was at the Khazanah Research Institute, I asked the question, when we want to do a fishery study, how to help the fishermen? And they say, how? I said, use mobile phone. Okay, why use the mobile phone? Because if you have a WhatsApp and the fisherman, he catches a very good garupa that has very high price, he can immediately on the sea send a WhatsApp picture of the garupa that he has caught to not just the middleman, to the best restaurants, to the person, and say, this is now available, you get somebody with packed ice, catch, wait for me, give me a good price. I can cut out the middleman, okay? And this is now possible, this has now happened, because some people have already done this, right? So, if Ibu, the Emak, can make the best nasi lemak, the best, product, nowadays with the WhatsApp, you cannot even meet the demand. So we are now getting city level web 360 degrees monitoring of facilities, fallen trees, broken drains, volunteer groups to clean up the environment, plant trees, make neighborhood nice. We can even have a new digital development book. Tun Razak did this, in the 60s, right? In which every ADO had a development book. And then that development book would tell the resident and the district officer and up, to the Prime Minister's department, what's happening in the kampung. Why don't we make that digital to get that feedback? So let me very quickly conclude, okay? Malaysia, in my view, is in a geopolitical sweet spot. We are a young population, small population relative to the natural resources that we have, but we are not owners of the best rainforest, the best, marine reefs, the best biodiversity. If we cut it all down, we polluted it all down, we all suffer. Everybody needs us. The Americans need us. The Chinese need us. EU needs us. Japan needs us. Russia needs us. Middle East needs us. ASEAN needs us. We can interface with everybody. We are small enough to be the sang kancil in the Perang Gajah. Okay, in my view, we can become the first Islam majority country to reach advanced income status, excluding the oil-rich countries. By the way, if the solar tech cost now is cheaper to extract energy than oil or gas, you mark my words, we have already reached peak oil and price of oil will not grow very much, okay? Because everybody will switch to solar energy. And if everybody reaches to solar energy, what better place to have light and electricity and Wi-Fi in every kampung, in every resource area, so that we can use online teaching, raise young about education, think about the new economy, learn for life, adapt, innovate, and create. So everything is whether we are positive or negative. The glass is either half full or half empty. In my view, Malaysia has the great opportunity, and you are the young people who are in the best position to make that transformation. Thank you very much, and now we stop for answers, okay? Pause for answers. Thank you.